All right, welcome back to Iron Sharpens Iron, friends. Our quote today is from Billy Graham. It says, "A good father is one of the most unsung, unpraised, unnoticed, and yet one of the most valuable assets in our society." So let's talk about it. All right, welcome to Iron Sharpens Iron, friends. Solo is out again this week, and I have the pleasure of having a longtime friend, Brent Jensen, aka Jensky, with me today as we pay tribute to all of the fathers, the future fathers, and father figures out there. So, Jensky, welcome and thank you for joining me today.
Awesome, Jake. Good to be here. I feel like I can check it off the bucket list now, Jake, being on this podcast with us. It's good to see you, my friend. And I haven't heard that name Jensky in quite a while. So thanks for bringing that back too.
I love that it was in your email, though.
Man, changing emails are a pain. I had to, that one's been around for a while.
Oh, there you go. Well, I'm so thrilled to have you here today and happy to check off a bucket list item for you. And thank you for the compliment implied there. This is so much fun. So you and I go way back to the college days where we were roommates for several years and where we used to stay up way too late eating Domino's pizza and playing Mario Kart.
One of those Mario Kart, man, it's got me through college.
It almost prevented us from finishing college,
That's
but
true. That's true. Yeah.
But the Jensky, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and just introduce yourselves to our listeners out there. Let them know who you are and why you feel so passionately about our topic for today.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Jake. My name's, as Jake mentioned, Brent Jensen. I go by Jensky. At least I used to go by Jensky. Back when I was a teenager, and I kind of carried on to college years. And so I'm glad Jake's bringing that back to today. But I live here in southeastern Michigan, in the Detroit area. Today's topic on fatherhood. I have four kids, two two boys, two girls. Keeps me very busy. The age range between the oldest and the youngest we're talking about is about 9, 10 years. And so we've got a couple year difference there between our four kids. But love talking fatherhood. I think it's just so important. And I love that quote too. You talked about it, Jake, from the beginning on really being a valuable asset. And that's how I view fatherhood. And often I think it can be an unsung role as well. And so that's why I'm glad we're talking about this topic today, because this is a way we can bring more light to the importance of fatherhood and how it's such a huge asset that makes society and communities what they can be. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, and you've got some teens as we were talking, and your oldest is probably getting pretty close to finishing high school, right?
I believe he's the same grade as your oldest, Jake. He'll be a
Uh,
junior next
Going
year.
into junior year.
Yep,
Ah,
going
so
into junior year. Yeah, exactly. And the youngest is just wrapping up kindergarten. So that's the age range we're talking about from oldest to youngest.
there's quite a span there. Yeah, and it keeps us busy. And we go back to that quote, the unsung, unpraised, unnoticed, one of the most valuable assets. And so this is fun. We talked about Mother's Day and the importance of the wonderful women in our lives several weeks ago. But I know there are those as we think about fathers and the importance that fathers play in the lives of their children and also in the community and society at large. There's those like you, Jensky, I know whose minds go directly to their own fathers. We were messaging about this. I know you said your father's your hero and mentor. There's others out there though that their father may have been absentee, and therefore it was their stepfather, adoptive father, or somebody else who stepped in and filled that role. There's others who may have lost their father for a variety of reasons, didn't have one in the home. Maybe if they did, the man was abusive or just kind of absentee, wasn't involved. But the purpose of the conversation today is to highlight the great things that fathers and father figures do, to honor them and hopefully inspire others to step up and fill that role for their kids, or even for somebody else's kids. If they don't have kids of their own, or their kids are grown, or whatever. Like if they just notice that someone else's kids need that role model in their lives, hopefully inspire the men out there to step up and fill that role.
Jake, one thing you kind of mentioned that I wanted to mention today, speaking of kind of different role models, is as a father, one of the things I'm passionate about is just surrounding my own kids with as many positive influences as possible, right? And And I think the different fathers. So I don't want me to be the only man who has a positive influence on my kids' lives. I think it's important to certainly their friends will impact them, but make sure there's other male influences in their lives that they can look to for inspiration and to help them throughout their lives as well. So
No, that's fantastic. There's a quote. Denzel Washington said this, and I know that everybody listening can respect Denzel because Denzel is the man.
he is the man.
He's an amazing human being. So great actor, but also a phenomenal human being. And he said, if the father is not in the home, the boy will find a father in the streets. I saw it in my generation and every generation before me and everyone since. You know, the when also as I was thinking about this topic, as you were saying, Jensky, is looking at, making sure there are these role models in our children's lives. As I look back on my own life, one thing I notice is, I've always just craved having a mentor or father figure person. And so, I was blessed and fortunate that my own father set an example of faith and service and hard work. He's past retirement age now, and he still works very hard to make sure that my mother is provided for. His example, that of my brothers, is one of the biggest reasons I decided to give 2 years of my life and be a missionary in Brazil. But being vulnerable, there have been times where my relationship with my dad has been pretty rocky. And times where we didn't speak very frequently to each other. But those other mentor figures in my life, to the point you were making, they were so crucial to me during those times because they filled a void that existed in those moments where my dad and I were having a rough patch. And that's where what Denzel says also just rings so true to me. If you aren't getting that from your own father, whether because you have a rough relationship or they're just not present or they're just an abusive individual, if they don't have that reliable presence of a trusted father or father figure, they will go seek it out and seek it out on the streets. And if they can't find it elsewhere. And so um, I see that because of just the calming and stabilizing and protective presence that a father provides in an individual's life.
Yeah, Jake, I think that's absolutely true. Everyone's influenced. Like everybody is influenced by people, whether it's good or for bad, and we will find it. And that's what makes, I think, people who they are, right? By the things that influence us. And so, yeah, I think that's so true. And that quote from Denzel definitely rings true for me too.
And where, so you mentioned you try to find other mentors, role models, father figures for your kids. Where do you go to look for them?
You actually mentioned one, Jake, without even thinking about it, which is the missionaries for our church. Trying to have those, these are, for those listeners out there, young men, 19 to 21-year-olds, typically out serving a mission for our church, volunteer. And that's one way, or that's some individuals that we try and have into our home because that's a good influence on my kids. Whether I'm not talking to my boys, we've got two girls too. I think that's just the positive influences because they're out serving and doing good. I think of some friends I had when I was younger, growing up, and their fathers played an influence on me. And so it was like if I had good friends, often they've got good fatherly figures in their lives too that have made an impact on my life as well. So there's a few places I think about. I think about other role models for my kids' lives.
One that I was thinking of also is sports and other extracurricular activities through the school system. Generally, you're going to have coaches that play a huge role. I know for my oldest, when he plays water polo in high school, which is it's I'd never been exposed to this until he started playing it, and sport is rough.
It looks rough.
uh, I know like football, there's a lot of hard hitting. Well, in polo, there's no pads, and a lot of it happens under the water, and there's just kicking and scratching and all sorts of things. And it looks like he's been in a boxing ring sometimes when he gets out of the pool. And his coaches, the first year he started, he's a 14-year-old kid at the time. just starting as a freshman. It's a small team, and so he was put on the varsity team, and so he's in the pool against these other like 17, 18-year-old just giants, comparatively speaking. And those coaches were such a huge influence on him. And so to the teachers and the coaches out there that play such an impact, that play such a positive role in kids' lives today, thank you for that, because especially for teenagers, that kids are so easily influenced for good or for bad. And a lot of times they may not want to because they're asserting their independence or they don't like the rules at home. And so they truthfully are looking for other parental figures. And I know we're speaking specifically of male influences today, but they're looking for that and they crave it. And so if you can find those positive figures, whether through activities or through local faith efforts with church and those kind of congregations, they can get that same positive reinforcement that parents want to provide in the home. They can get it outside as well.
Jake, and I love that you brought up sports. I think sports is a great place to find not only just good figures, but also the things that you learn through sports, which are led by those coaches, whether it's teamwork and discipline and hard work and perseverance. You mentioned water polo. Our oldest, he's a bowler and a tennis player. So those are his two sports that he does. And bowling especially has just been awesome for him to get involved in. It's not just the coaches, it's his peers. It's a very encouraging, supportive environment. Now he's been excelling at it. And a huge piece of that is the positive influences from his coaches and peers as part of being on that team.
There's a couple quotes. I wanted to highlight just a few of the things and talk through a few of just the really critical roles. So we're talking kind of just the ability to influence, but a couple other things that came up as I was kind of thinking on this. And that really I think highlight the good that fathers do. And so as a way to pay tribute, here's a few topics and thoughts from some influential people in society. So the first one comes from former President Barack Obama. He said, "What I've come to understand is that the path to progress is always paved with fathers who are present and who take responsibility for their children and families." And I would also add to that, that also teach responsibility to their children. From Coach Jim Valvano, "My father gave me the greatest gift anyone could give another person. He believed in me."
I love that.
That one hit
Yep.
home for me as well. It's so critically important for kids to know their parents believe in them. I've noticed with my own kids personally, when they feel and know that I believe in them and in their ability to succeed in whatever it is they're doing, whether it's being on stage in theater that they do quite frequently, whether it's in their sports, whether it's just in their academics, whatever it is, if they know and truly feel that I believe in them, their eyes just light up and they go out feeling they can conquer the world. Another one from Dr. Phil McGraw. "The most important thing you can do for your children is to love their mother and be there as a consistent and engaged father." This one, and the next quote as well, maybe I think the most important. In the old days, when when a woman would enter a room, the men would stand up. And there was an inherent respect that men would give to women. And to some degree, I think that is lost in our world today. I know living here in the South, here in Texas, it's very much still prevalent. And I love that because there's just manners and respect are part of the Southern hospitality atmosphere. And I think it's so critical for young men. I think seeing how the male mentors in their lives, whether it's their dad or another father figure, treat women influences how they're going to treat women. And for the young women, seeing how their father treats their mom teaches them how they should expect to be treated by the men they will end up having relationships with.
So true. Yeah. And I love all these quotes. A few words that stood out to me. Be present, be engaged, and fatherhood so much more than just providing a roof over over your family's head. It's so much more than that. And yeah, Jim Valvano's on. He believed in me. Um, yeah, because when you have that, when you have people behind you that support you, that believe in you, it does feel like you said you can just conquer the world, and it's amazing what belief can do for a person.
One of my favorite coaches of all time, John Wooden, legendary coach from
Coach,
UCLA.
just call him coach. He's the goat.
He is the goat. He's the goat. In my small tangent here, but in my mind, he's the goat of all coaches of all sports of all time.
And my dad would agree with you. Speaking of fathers, my dad was a big UCLA fan, so he'd be on board with with
I
him
mean, he
being the
probably
GOAT.
remembers when Wooden was winning everything. Like, I mean, four March Madness tourneys undefeated in a row. Like, it's no one will ever
It's the
call.
dynasty of all dynasties, is what
It
that
really
is.
is. And that that's going to be a whole podcast at some point. Is just talking about his methodology.
I
But
want to join that one. Have me on that one, please.
we'll bring you as a guest. That's I actually use this as a leadership training that I do with my team and in the organizations that would no matter what company I'm working for, I always do one talking about John Wooden's book on leadership. Um, and a lot of it was the mentor role, and that's kind of what this quote is about for him is being a role model is the most powerful form of educating. I mean, he wasn't just a coach; he was also a educator. But being a role model is the most powerful form of educating. Too often, fathers neglect it because they get so caught up in making a living, they forget to make a life.
That's good.
Wise words. I mean, you were just talking about this with, as men typically have the responsibility in a home of being the primary provider. Now, nowadays, it usually takes both parents because cost of everything is going up so fast that it's hard to keep up. But in a stereotypical situation, it is generally the man. And in a lot of homes today, it still is, right? And it takes a lot of time. I mean, you and I do this, Jensky, and work of the hours that we're awake, work is at least 50% typically. And it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, and our focus is so much on providing for a family, making a living, as John Wooden says. It can be very easy at the end of a work day to pour into the family and make a life or make multiple lives if you have multiple kids. Being the example, right? I think of Wooden's words about being a role model. And the things that I was thinking about this, just that role model of respect, of decency, of faith, of hard work, of being that example that we tried to teach to kids or the kids that we're influencing. And, you know, thinking through some of those role models that I had when I was younger, I see that as I interacted with these father figures, with my dad and with others like him, I picked up their characteristics, whether good or bad. I used to work at the municipal golf course back in Idaho when I was growing up, and it was awesome. I love golf. I got to play for free, and so I put up with a very small salary when I was working there. I was actually just talking about this with someone else, and back when I was working, the minimum wage was like in Idaho was like $5.15 an hour, and I was happy for it. Well, I wasn't super thrilled about $5.15 an hour, but I was happy because I got to play golf for free. But the guys there on the course that I worked with, the supervisors and the adults that worked there full time, they tended to be a little bit rougher by Idaho standards, I should say, and not by like Compton standards. And so I kind of followed suit, and peer pressure is a thing. But youth leaders at church, usually really great men. I was in Boy Scouts of America as well, and I tried to be like those individuals. And even now as an adult, we can see that we tend to become like the people we're hanging out with. And so as we're looking for mentors and role models, find the ones that are going to take you where you want to go. But for the men out there listening, your influence on these kids around you is going to help them become a great member of society. They're going to turn into the kind of people we would want in the world. Or if you're being a negative role model on them and a bad example, know that they're watching, and they're going to.
Yeah, Jake, and this kind of goes back to the John Wooden quote, a bit, but I think a huge thing that just I'm thinking about now, I think more so lately, is what's my own definition of what it means to provide, right? You mentioned that. And typically, traditionally, I think we think of providing as, you've got the clothes you need, you've got a place to live, a shelter of some kind. You've got kind of those life necessities. But I think we need to expand that definition of what it means to provide, because there's other ways to provide that we need to provide. Emotionally, supportive, encouraging support. Yeah, there's just so many other ways that we need to really inspire and encourage our own children, but those other kids who look to us as examples. And I think that's just a huge thing to remember is it's not just our own kids looking to us. There's others. And often what I found in my life is I'm looking at somebody as my example, and they don't even know I'm looking at to them as an example. And so that's why it's so important to just kind of live our lives that way, is because sometimes we just have no idea who is looking to us and who we are influencing at different times of our lives.
Oh, for sure. I love that. Expand the definition of what it means to provide. It's not just the clothes and food and shelter, as you're saying. That's awesome. And growing up, I don't think like emotional and mental health was something that was really talked about as being something we needed to even be aware of. And so that emotional safety that needs to exist in a home and, in a home, in a school, like wherever we are, right? Having that emotional safety, I think is definitely very important. It used to be that, and right or wrong, there's a lot of different beliefs and philosophies about what I'm going to say. So I'm just going to put it out there. But it used to be that if kid got in trouble, that discipline was you go cut the willow branch or you get the belt or the paddle or whatever it is, right? And you spank the child. And probably not the safest environment emotionally for that child being disciplined. And right or wrong, I'm not here to judge. I think there probably is a better way where you can teach. Generally speaking, society's gotten away from that. And we tried to be a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? Supportive in the way we discipline. But looking at what else do we provide? I think of like, scouts. I was in Boy Scouts, and these adults were there. They were volunteer, and they were just teaching basic life skills. And as a 10, 11, 12, all the way up to 14, 15, when I eventually exited Boy Scouts, they're trying to teach me knots, and they're trying to teach me like knife safety and all these things. I was not the quickest learner at some of these skills, but the patience and the time they took out
Yeah.
of their lives to teach me these things. And I still use so many of these skills today. And going camping and knowing how to start a fire and to cook over a fire and all these different things that these guys spent hours and hours and hours teaching me and the other scouts. I can't thank them enough for that.
And patience is huge. I love that you brought up patience because that's, I think, an often overlooked attribute of fathers and just parenting, which is such a huge positive, right? When you have that level of patience. And Jake, speaking of kind of skills you learned when you were younger, that's one thing I wished I was better at in looking back at my life is why did I not pay attention to my dad's? He used to call them life lessons. He'd be like, here's another life lesson. Sometimes he would say those words. And I wish, like looking back, like even in college life, we knew each other in college and know how to do some of those skills. Even my mom, like, why was I not paying better attention to cooking? Like that would have been so helpful throughout my life, and I totally didn't even care when I was younger. Stuff like that. I just wish I wish I had, learned better when I was younger.
Hey,
Um,
what's wrong with
you
Totino's
know,
pizza and ramen noodles for dinner every day?
frozen food, man. I'm still doing it. Look at that,
The banquet. It was the banquet pot pies. Isn't that what
man.
we used to get all the
Pot
time?
pies, frozen chicken tenders. Right.
There's so much that goes into this, and I'm just so looking back, I God, I get a little emotional thinking about this of just the time investment that these individuals poured into me, and thinking as a father myself now of kids middle school and high school age, I try. Patience is hard for me. I am not great at patience. And if my kids were in the room with me, they would jump up and down saying, "Oh, you are 100% right on that one, Dad." But, I try and I try and word an example. It's not always easy, but especially like when work is stressful. The past few weeks at work have been ridiculously stressful. And so at the end of the day, I struggle finding that energy to just pour into my kids and to teach them these lessons. I look at my oldest, he's going to be leaving the home in like 2 years. I think of like all the things that I feel like I still need to teach him, and it's almost overwhelming. And, you know, beyond those life skills, I personally believe that probably second only to promoting faith, because I think it's so critical that we instill a sense of faith and moral values in children, and that men have a wonderful ability to do that. So same with the mothers as well. But time with children is the single best way to show love. And Jensky, I know you're a great example of this. I've seen many of your fun posts on Facebook. I know Elisa sees them as well, and she calls it out and kind of like a Jake, why can't you be more like Jensky
Oh, don't
sort
put
of
me
situation.
don't
I'm
put me
putting
in
you on a
there.
pedestal, buddy.
No, I don't want to be in there.
So one of the coolest ways, and kind of talking about, giving the men out there ideas of what can we do to, make sure that time spent with the youth, whether our own kids or those that we're just influencing, right? How can we make sure that the time spent with our youth is quality?
Yeah,
And you have like you're an expert in my opinion, Jensky, on this, on prioritizing daddy dates with your kids
mhm.
and getting really creative with them. And so I would love for you to be able to share some examples and some of your favorite ones that you've done, and how you just make sure that is a priority, how you schedule the time and make sure you're able to do this with your kids.
Jake, and first off, too, speaking of time, I believe time is often the most valuable asset we have, right? And so when you were sharing about the Boy Scout example, those leaders, those adults, giving up their time, right, is I think the hugest thing in our lives. And so the fact that they gave that to you spoke volumes to you and blessed your life. So we can take that, right, those examples, and apply that into our own household situations, and such. And as I was thinking about this question, I had a couple ideas come to mind in terms of specific actionable things that fathers can do. And the consistent theme with these few items that I'm going to talk about is about being intentional and about making connections, because I believe that's what it's all about. And intentional, by the way, Jake, is my favorite word in the English language. I just love the word intentional. I don't know why. It's just really important. Speaking of time and prioritize, and that comes back to being intentional, right, with how we spend our time and the priorities we have, in our lives, and also with making connections with our children. I think is so important to do. And so the first thing I wanted to mention, this is something I've tried to do really good at this year, certainly a work in progress, is to hug my kids every morning before they go to school. Simple, something I try and do regardless of when they go to school, which includes my earliest leaves at 5:30 in the morning for a church seminary before school. And so that's really important. I'm an early riser anyway, so it's not too big of a stretch for me, Jake, but I think it's important because that's a moment to be intentional, to connect, to show our kids that somebody cares about them when they start the day, every day. And so that's something I've really tried to really be good at lately, especially this year. And as I've thought about growing up, it's tough. Society is tough. I think it's harder now than when we were kids, Jake. My dad used to tell me the same thing. Brent, it's harder for you than it was when I was a kid. And now I'm telling my kids the same thing. And so I think
Yeah.
starting that day, making a connection to let them know that you care about them, I think puts them on the path to have a successful day. I truly do believe that. And so that's
Yeah.
actionable item
I
is something I think about.
I love that. I mean, it's an emotional connection, it's a physical connection. Like there's literally like touch involved. If we think about the different love languages, right? That hits on them. I mean, I'm sure there's some positive words of affirmation that go along with the hug that you share. And so it hits on a few different ones all at once. And I remember Jack Canfield saying that hugs, so at his conferences, there's every day. I believe if I remember right, it happened at the start of each session. He would kind of introduce uh, what was going to happen, and then there's literally like he would have 5 minutes specifically just for hugs. And people would go around the room and just hug basically as many people as you can. And the point was, hugs provide a sense of emotional safety, and they help someone immediately feel cared about and that they're safe and that they're important. And, to your point about connection, that there is a connection with another human being. But he brought up the point that there's been scientific studies about this, and that for the human, and I hope I get the number right because it's been a few years and I'm trying to remember, but it was something like 7 to 8 hugs a day just to
Mm.
keep yourself emotionally level. And then if you get more than that, then it actually like builds up your emotional health. And if you have less than that, it actually like reduces your emotional health. And so that's awesome. I love that. And for, like you said, it's so simple for the kids. I'm sure it means the world. And it's just a reinforcement that their dad loves them.
Yeah, I do want to mention too, speaking of the hugs, right? Because you talked about this. There's different, um, household family situations, right? Maybe the kids aren't in the home with you, and so the point is, again, be intentional about finding the way that you can in your situation to make that connection. Maybe it's if they live in another place, maybe it's a text, maybe it's something else. But the point is to be intentional, to let them know you care. I think that's the point. With me, it's been hugs.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And then the dates. You mentioned the dates. This is my favorite highlight of my time. That's why I have to share it. I share it on social. I don't share much else actually. If you look at my Facebook, it's like kid dates, kid dates, kid dates, kid dates. Like
Yep.
that's like what that's like basically what it's turned into. But the way we do it, and we've done this one for quite a while, and this is about quality time. Definitely. By the way, if you ever have a love language episode, I'm also a big fan. So you can have me back on the podcast for the love language episode. I'll come back
I
for
love
that
this
one.
assuming the sale you've got going on here.
Hey, I mean, I've got John Wooden, love languages. Just keep bringing me back. But speaking of the dates, and the way we've done this is we do monthly dates with each of our kids, and the focus here is on the one-on-one quality time. I believe it's important to have family quality time as a group. I also am a firm believer that the one-on-one time is important. And when you start having more than one kid, that gets harder and harder. So
Yeah.
again, you have to be more intentional about it. You have to be intentional about it, or time's going to pass us by, and the time's just it's just not going to happen. And so
So
we
how
have,
do you do this,
yeah,
Brent? So sorry to interrupt, but
that's
how do you
okay.
do this? Because you've got 4 kids, you've got your
Yep.
wife, and I know your wife wants to have time with you as well. I mean, how do you split yourself 5 ways and make sure that this still happens on a frequent basis?
Yeah. First off, we put the dates on the calendar. So we have a family calendar. We write them down there. That ensures we don't lose track of when they're going to happen. So it takes being proactive, right? It takes a proactive and intentional approach to do that. And then we actually split up months the way we do it in our house, where I will take, so I actually took May. I was over May. Renelle, my wife, had June. I'll have July. She'll have
Okay.
August. And so that's the way we actually make sure they happen every month is I take a month with the kids. She takes a month with the kids. And that's how we ensure that they happen every time. And they've
Okay.
actually changed. Yeah, they've changed over time, Jake, where at the beginning, and we've done this for years, it was more about me planning the dates, making them happen. And now, since the kids are getting old enough to they really get excited about this time, we plan them together most of the time. And so it becomes a partnership,
Mm.
more so than just me planning them. And it's so fun because a lot of the dates are really focused on them. And so they're very different based on the age and personality. I'll give you a quick example. Last month, one of my favorite dates done in a long time was with Lila. She is our fifth grader, and she is the life of the party, the extrovert, the outgoing personality. And so her
Mm.
date and me, we actually went to Salvation Army and we bought clothes for each other that we then had to wear at a restaurant later that day because I knew she would do that with me. The other kids, they would never do that with me. I
Yeah.
knew she would. And so the date was customized to something that we would do together. And we had a lot of fun doing that. And so it's just been fun that the kids look forward to them. I've already actually got July planned, Jake, for
Hmm.
a few of the kids, just because it's fun to talk about and really make the time to have that quality time with each of my kids on a one-on-one basis.
So I have to ask a question for our listeners. What did she end up getting for you? Was it super
Oh, Jake,
embarrassing?
you're gonna like this because she did not go the embarrassing route. She could have.
Oh.
There's some weird stuff in there.
There's weird stuff at thrift stores. I did this as a day date for senior prom, and it
Okay.
went the embarrassing way
Okay.
in a really big way. But what did she get for you?
Yeah. So I'm a big Michigan fan, Jake, and you know this. The
Hmm.
Michigan Wolverines, that's my college team. I did not go there, but that's the right home team that I support. Lila, my daughter, knows this, and so she bought me a Michigan State shirt, knowing that I would never want to be in public wearing a Michigan State shirt, Jake. And so I now have a Michigan State shirt that has been worn one time that I will probably never wear again. She also, though, she got me some Harry Potter socks to go along with that, and she actually bought me two hats actually to go along with that as well. But I'll probably wear the rest, but I'm not touching that shirt again. So if you want it, I'll give it to you.
So if she had picked out an Ohio State Buckeyes, assuming that would be
Oh
found in a Michigan
man,
Salvation Army, would you have had another date with her?
that would have been brutal. That one may not have been posted. I may have done the dates, but I would have not posted that one on social media.
So
Oh
she knew
man.
where the line was. That's good.
Yep. And my other daughter last month, I could talk for days about this, Jake. She's my adventurous eater. So she's the one
Hmm.
that is more willing to try new foods. And so we actually went to a friend's house from they're Indian, and they taught us how to make curry. And so
Oh,
we went over
awesome.
there and we ate curry with them. And I could not teach you or anybody else, but they taught me while I was there, and we had a fun time with that date. So
I love curry.
yeah,
So this is cool. So I think when one of the concerns folks may have is, well, this is great in principle, but in practice this could get really expensive. And what you're sharing is that the things that the ideas you've had so far and the examples you've shared aren't things that are necessarily going to break the bank. But what other advice would you have for those who want to implement this? How did you
yeah.
start finding like creative ideas that aren't just going to the movies or the mini golf bowling alley that can be kind of more traditional or just generic? Where did you start finding the ideas?
And Jake, I'll get to that question in a second, but I want
Yeah,
to touch
for sure.
on the other thing you mentioned, which was the cost,
Hmm.
because that's a huge, yeah. We think about dating, whether it's with, a girlfriend, a spouse, kids, cost always you think about. It's expensive to date. I can't afford to date. And so we've actually done some fun months of dates where I will put out a challenge to the kids, and I'll be like, hey, this month, $10 or less, $10 or less. Let's come up with something. We did hot and ready pizza, from Little Caesars one time. You can even do free dates. We've done at-home dates where, you make popcorn and you watch something together. We've had dates where me and one of my daughters just wanted to find a show to watch together. So we actually watched, Jake, a few like episodes of different shows to try and pick the show to watch, on that date.
Hmm.
Another thing we've done recently, Jake, and this will speak to kind of your second point, is where do you find the creative ideas? We actually have I bought this last December. It's a small calendar, and it has unique days on each day of the year. So, and there's so many random days out there. And each
Yeah.
of those days you could transform into a date. Whether it's Scrabble Day or Make Popcorn Day or Chicken Nugget Day. Like I'm just making stuff up here, but there's
There's
these
probably
days
a
out
day
there.
for it. Yeah.
There's probably a day for everything you can think of and more. And that is just a fun way to get your brain thinking about how could I make this creative? Because again, dating is all about time. It's not so much about the activity, it's about the time and it's about making those connections is what's important, not the money. And even the activity can become secondary.
Are there resources online you've utilized to spark ideas, or is this really just coming out of the imagination of the kids?
Movies actually have inspired me multiple times when I watch movies, whether it's a movie that has specific dates or I just get inspired often when I watch movies and TV shows. And I think to myself, that could be a date. That could be a date. And the other thing that we do, Jake, is kids are often more creative than us.
Hmm.
It's just the way it is. That sometimes we get older and we lose some of that creativity sometimes along the way.
Yeah, for sure.
But I ask them and they have great ideas. And so for July, for Lila, she wants to do a lemonade stand. And so we're going to go outside and do a lemonade. And this was like her idea, right?
Hmm.
And so, when the kids get to a certain age, ask them. They'll be excited about it. They will be excited that you want to do something that's important to them too. And so that's a huge resource, asking kids. But yeah, there's online resources too. You could just Google date ideas for kids, you could find lists of tons of them. That would be more than just dinner and a movie. Yeah.
ChatGPT could probably come up with some
Yes.
stuff too, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So one last question that I have on this. What is probably the most unique date that you've done?
And Jake, that's a good question. Most unique. Oh, you know what? I've got a couple. I got a couple. One, this wasn't time of year is what made it unique, Jake. This was last November. We had a day, first week in November. It was like 70 degrees, which is unheard of in Michigan. It was
Yeah,
breezy, but it was like 70. And it was like one day before it dropped down and got cold again. And so with our youngest, who is a kindergartner, we got out the kiddie pools and we did a pool date outside in Michigan
November.
in November, Jake. I'm telling you, it was, and it was free. Speaking of our creative free date that we
Yeah.
just did, because you know what? We can't do this very often, so let's do it this time. That one was fun.
See, we had in Houston kind of the opposite of that. We had a day this winter where we got like 4 inches of snow. No, it was
Bust out the
gone by
sleds.
2 p.m.
Bust out the sleds, Jake.
Well, we didn't have the sleds, but they went and made snowmen on the golf course. And I think like everybody did. It's funny driving up the road. You could see snowmen dotting the golf course all the way along the fairways.
That's awesome. Another one I did too, Jake. I'll share one more. This was also a fall date, actually, which was with one of my daughters, and we did a photo shoot, which was you think of like a almost like a wedding photo shoot, kind of, where you have different outfits. And so we actually had 3 or 4 different outfits, and you went to different locations. My wife came with us and took pictures of us in these different locations in different outfits, and it was just a lot of fun.
Fun.
No.
That's so cool. So I love that. I know you had a list of a few things. Was there beyond the dates? Was there others you wanted to share?
Yeah, these ones, I think it's important this time of year too. I've been thinking about it a lot, which is prioritizing attending kid events. It can be sports, like you mentioned. It can be school graduations, anything that they're involved with attending. And that can even be school conferences. Jake, I was kind of a little sad when I went to our parent-teacher conferences at the beginning of the school year, and there weren't many men there. It's that setting where the teacher's speaking and all the parents come, and I remember just looking around and being like, you know what, there should be more men here in this room, and so prioritizing those types of events to be a present, be engaged father, I think is super important. And so that's one I wanted to mention. And the other thing is just being sure that you're asking your kids questions. It seems so simple, um, but asking questions, getting to know them, and then remembering those details they tell you, I think is huge because that's how you kind of show when you're listening to somebody, where you remember things that they've told you in the past. And my dad is the top listener I've ever met. But I think those are a few things that not quite as creative at the dates, but still super important to make those things important too.
But still, just it's that time,
Yeah.
right? To a child, time is spelled Love. I've said it on
Yep.
previous episodes, and it's interesting. The elementary school my kids went to, the Burke's Bulldogs, they have, and I can't remember.
Bulldogs. I like
Yeah,
that.
they have a program, and I can't remember the name of it right now. But the essence of it is that they have fathers sign up, and one day, I think they do it on a weekly basis. They have different dads come in, but they'll have one day a week where they come in and they may be in the classes, they'll be in the cafeteria for lunches, and they just interact with the kids. And at that school, all the teachers, all the staff are women. And so it's a way that they have men come in and just be that role model and that mentor and that kind of
Mm,
safe figure, um, positive male influence on the lives of the students. It's really cool.
I love that.
So, when you were talking
Yep.
about being present for school activities and things, that's what came to mind. And you shamed me a little bit, Jensky, unknowingly. I had the blessing of working from home for several years, and so I've been able to go to a lot of school events that other dads whose jobs, may prevent them from going to. But I'll tell you, like the class parties, I don't know if it's the same in Michigan,
Man.
but they have these class parties at Christmas time and at the end of the school year, and it's literally like the classroom, moms and dads will have treats and some sort of activity, like coloring or making a craft or whatever. And the parents are invited to come. And it is my least favorite thing that out of all of the school events that I've ever been to,
Interesting.
because you just stand in the back of the room and you're just staring at these kids. They're like they're building a snowman or something,
Oh
right? Or they're
man.
doing some game and then they're eating their candy or donuts or whatever they got. And it's like an hour and I feel like I'm just standing there and it felt like such a waste of time. But I know to my kids, the times I went, it meant the world to them to look back and see that their dad's there, and Elisa too, right? It means the world to them to see mom there too. But seeing parents, because the poor kids that their parents were unable to or just didn't go, whichever it was, they're looking around and they're like, and so we would end up adopting some of these other kids for that hour. But just being present, like you said, it's so important.
And I don't want to shame anybody here either. On that topic, but I think we can use work sometimes as an excuse too. Right? Like if it's something we really don't want to go to, we gotta work. I gotta work. So I think my point here is, we can't make everything. Kids have a ton of events. They do.
Yep.
I certainly don't make all the events. I have to work. I have to provide that way too. But I think it's just ask ourselves that question of, can I get off work early this day? Can I do this? And just really doing what we can to be as present as possible. No, you know what? We can't make everything, but let's do what we can to be there as much as possible.
And I think with all things that we suggest on this podcast, friends, is immediately applying like every action item, that we've ever shared. Overwhelming. Do what you can, build it in, right? Maybe it's just at the end of the day, as help put the kids to bed. There is a stereotype that goes around with fathers that they're just on the couch watching football and eating chips and drinking beer. And we can break out of that stereotype and show a better way. And it's not only the mother's responsibility to nurture in the home, it is also the responsibility of the father to be a true father and teach through word, through example, and to be present and help. And so, help put the kids to bed. Get up in the night and change that diaper and, give your wife a break. Hold your child for a while, rock them to sleep. Be present from the time they're born until the time that, you leave the world. And whatever you can do, you know, football is going to come back every season. There is, baseball season, I feel like never ends. Sometimes it's 162 games. It's okay if you miss one. Go to that kid event if you're able to do so. If work allows it, if your time allows it, go be present. Take the time to teach your kids life skills and be intentional. I think, Jensky, that's so important. I love how you say that's your favorite word. Be intentional with your time. It's a limited resource. The only way you get more of it is to sleep less. So plan it out. Whether your kids are in your home or whether you only get them on the weekends, if it's only on the weekends you see your kids, make sure those weekends are value added and make the best of it.
Jake, I love you talking at the end of the day too, because that brings. I talked about hugs in the morning, at night, bridging the day with those moments to have connection. So important.
And kids, I've noticed that kids are generally more talkative at night. Elisa is the best at this. She spends time in the rooms much better than I do, and part of that's just I'm an introvert. By the end of the day, energy levels generally gone, so I try to catch them before bedtime and have time. But they start opening up and they love it when I stay. So something that's a goal for me to do better with. But friends, again, do what you can. But the important thing is to be intentional and work at it and find ways to get better. I'm going to go back to, a couple of these quotes, right, with Coach Wooden, that role model is the most powerful form of educating. There's more than just making a living. Make sure you're also making a quality life by teaching your kids. And, the one we started with from Billy Graham, men out there, the work you do, sometimes being the provider may just be taken for granted. The influence you have on the world You may feel sometimes it's unnoticed. I guarantee you it's not. I'll give one example in closing. I mentioned I worked with the scouts. So when I was living in Arkansas, I was working with the 11-year-old scouts. And it was stressful. 11, 12-year-old boys are just crazy. It's like they're hyped up on unhealthy levels of caffeine, I swear. But
It's
they're
probably
they're
true.
running around. It seems like they're not paying attention. I'm trying to teach them how to tie knots and build fires and do all these things. Well, when my family moved to Houston, it was only then that the father of one of these young boys came up and let Lisa and I know that his son was crushed that I was moving because he looked up to Jacob Anderson so much. And I don't say that in a way to be bragging. I say that to just provide an example, because I had no idea that I meant so much to this kid. That my moving away was hard on him because a father figure and mentor of his was suddenly going to be absent in his life. So what you do may feel like it's unnoticed. It may feel like there's not a lot of gratitude for it. But fathers and father figures, you make such a difference in this world for the better. And so, thank you. Hopefully, some of these ideas that Jensky shared uh, are things you can take away and just be even more impactful and even better. And Jensky, thank you so much for joining today. It was so much fun to get to chat with you, and I love the ideas and the wisdom you shared.
Yeah, awesome. Anytime, Jake. Off the bucket list.
There we go. So, friends, it's Iron Sharpens Iron. Signing off until next week.